Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of FreeThought Hour. Now, there's been a slight change of plan because the guest that I promoted last week he's had to be rescheduled. He had a busy week, can't make it tonight, but we're going to get him to come on at the end of October, maybe the beginning of November. So you can look forward to the minister turned winemaker. In other words, he's moved from Jesus to Bacchus. So he's a treat to look forward to in the future. First of all, let me introduce my co-host, Tercia. Hello, Tercia. How the devil are you?
Well, the devil is definitely in my sinuses tonight. He's making all sorts of fires there. So if I tear up, it's not because I'm so emotional. It's just because I have a head cold of devilish proportions. So my throat's on fire and my sinuses are on fire. So that's how I'm doing. But I'm here and in the darkness because we have load shedding. So let's see how this goes.
Oh dear, you have got troubles. And our real guest tonight, not a co-host, a real guest is Professor Jurie van den Heelen. Have I got that right?
No, you didn't. Think of Heever Castle in England.
Heever, yes.
Heever Castle, it's Jurie van den Heever.
Jurie van den Heever. Yeah, Heever Castle. Heever Castle.
My family will eventually claim Heever Castle.
Well, it's not very far away. We could drive to it in about an hour from here. Yeah.
Well, I have warned John that this, since I've been co-hosting, this is the recolonization of England by the former colonized people. So Jurie, you are playing right up my alley.
This is round two, is it, where you come and colonize us?
Yep.
Okay. I look forward to that then. Just bring your wine.
Will do.
So, Jurie, your expertise is in paleontology. And we've had a number of paleontologists on this show previously, some of whom you may know about. Have you heard of Professor Mike Benton, for example?
Yes.
Mike, yes.
Yes, I know him. We were at a conference once. A very nice person.
Yes, indeed. Yes. His thing is the pre-dinosaur extinction, the pre-Jurassic extinction.
Yeah.
Which made it possible for the dinosaurs to come about, in a sense. Yeah. And another one we've had is I'm not going to be able to remember her name. Susie. She's at the Natural History Museum, and her specialism is not dinosaurs but archaeosaurs. You know, the ones that go more like this than like this.
Yeah. Archaeosaurs, that's right. Yeah, I'm not familiar with her. She's probably quite a young person.
She is indeed, yes.
Yes.
So your stamping ground is in the Karoo, I understand.
Yes, but sorry, go on.
And the Karoo is famous for another thing, isn't it? It's got a couple of interesting astronomical telescopes.
Yes, exactly. It's a very good area to do astronomy because of the clear sky. And they've been working on that, putting up that square kilometer dishes, as well as the large telescope at Sutherland. So that's certainly, if you want in South Africa to do stargazing, the Western Karoo around Sutherland is the very place for it. And it's amazing that one should be able there to study the planetary systems as well as the prehistory of South Africa, in the sense that these fossils that you find there, known as the mammal-like reptiles, are unique in science because of the fact that when Gondwana broke up, the Karoo, the Great Karoo, was not affected. So all the sedimentary layers remained intact, like the page of a book. So you can wander from the southwest, from a town called Sutherland, where the telescope is, right up to the Drakensberg over a period of about 50 million years. Wow. And you have consecutive layers lying undisturbed on top of one another. Consequently, it depicts beautifully the transition from reptiles to mammals.
Yes.
And that's why these guys are known as the mammal-like reptiles.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm envious. It sounds like a happy hunting ground. And it was sufficiently away inland, as it were, as it became from what became the coast when Gondwana land broke up, for it to still to be undamaged.
Yeah, that's true, because around the edge of the southern edge of South Africa, you actually have the Cape Fold Mountains, which literally, because of the cracking up of Gondwana and the slow movement back and forth, folded those layers into these huge mountains.
Yes.
But the Karoo on the inside of that escaped that movement and remained intact.
Excellent. Yes. Well,
Jurie,
can I just say that that's one area of interest that we would like to talk to you about, the mammalian reptiles, mammal-like reptiles. But the other area that we would like to talk to you about is creationism and your attitude towards that. Can I hand over to Tercia to talk to you about that?
Okay.
I know Jurie quite well. Jurie took my boys that I tutor and myself on an excursion to a farm in the Ceres area, where we did a little bit of fossil hunting ourselves, which was an amazing experience. And I know that Jurie grew up in the Ceres Mountains area, and but I've never actually asked you, or maybe I haven't just forgotten the answer, Jurie. How old were you when you discovered your first fossil? And could you talk to us a little bit about your years growing up in the Ceres Mountains on the farm?
Yep, I didn't grow up on a farm. My mother. Don't worry, it's okay. My mother owned a business, in fact, a bakery in Ceres. And I grew up there from what we called sub-A, first year school, 6 years old. And I had a friend of the same age, and he had a brother of university age who studied geology. And then weekends he came home from we were in primary school, and he would go up into the mountains where we were with your boys to go and look for invertebrate fossils, trilobites and things like that, and shells, and we tagged along. So I've been finding fossils since I was in primary school, and it's very easy, as you well know, to find fossils there, invertebrate fossils from the Devonian age, because it's so abundant. So there, I just grew up with invertebrate fossils. And later at university, I went to Stellenbosch University, because that's where kids of my family went. You didn't go to the English-speaking University of Cape Town. You went to the Afrikaans-speaking University of Stellenbosch. So I got there, and I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So the tests that they gave you indicated I had to do something at a BSc level, something in the sciences. And I initially wanted to do marine biology, but Stellenbosch didn't have marine biology. So I opted for botany and zoology. And in the third year in zoology, we had a wonderful woman, Professor Malan, who taught comparative anatomy and Karoo fossils. And it was literally one period we had with her. I came out, this is what I want to do, Karoo paleontology.
Yeah.
It gelled within one period. So perhaps picking up all those invertebrates in primary school helped, but that was like a snap decision.
Wow. You remind me of, I've remembered her name, Dr. Susie Maidment in the Natural History, Natural History Museum, because she tells a similar story about how her grandfather asked her when she was 7 what she wanted to be when she grew up. And she had one of these stuffed toy dinosaurs.
Yeah.
She held that up and said, dinosaur. And here she is 30 years later, and she is studying reptiles, ancient reptiles. So it's very unusual that people know what they want to do from so young an age. I'm still waiting to find out what my mission is.
Yeah. If you recall, Stephen Gould, the late Stephen Gould, wrote in one of his books that he was taken to, it was New York, so it must have been the American Museum of Natural History, when he was about 5.
Yes.
And when he saw fossils and he saw dinosaur fossils, he decided then that he was going to be a paleontologist.
Yes. Well, there you go. It obviously has an attraction. But what about this creationism? Because you were telling us a bit about some of your run-ins before we went live with creationists. So it's a bit of a thing with you, isn't it? Trying to provide an alternative point of view from theirs.
Yes, I have experienced that people like your Richard Dawkins has a very militant attitude towards any system of belief.
Yes.
My approach has been, and it's due to a publication I read years ago of an Australian biologist, which he titled "How to Debate the Creationists and Win."
Yes.
Sort of tongue in the cheek. And his attitude was not to attack and try to convince, because this puts people's backs up.
Yes.
You know, his idea was to debate, to put forward evidence and question. And I found that this actually worked quite well with students, because I've had creationists praying for me in front of my office, that sort of thing. So if you start out a conversation with them and you attack and you say this, they just turn off. They don't respond. No. But if you start questioning them and you question cleverly, they tie themselves up in knots.
Yes.
Because eventually they can't answer the question.
No.
So my approach has not been to be militant, antagonistic about it, but just to keep on putting the evidence out there and see how well you can convince somebody.
Yes. Well, this took off in America, didn't it? It became known as street epistemology, or the Socratic method.
Yes.
And it's just to get people to examine their own belief set so that they find out, because people don't like to be told. They like to find out, because that way they can think they're clever.
That's certainly so. And if you look at the last court case in Dover in America, about creationism and intelligent design, what the prosecution did with Michael B. He's the guy that wrote Darwin's Black Box, and he was questioning him on pronouncements that B himself made, saying there is no evidence to show how the blood cascade system could evolve, and how flagella and those things could evolve. And it got him to keep saying there is no evidence. And while he was doing this, he was piling up on the desk where this guy was sitting articles proving that, to the extent that the judge later on said, listen, I get your point, because he was virtually hiding the guy behind these stacks of publications. And in the end, Michael B. had to acknowledge he was wrong.
Yes.
And then, of course, the whole case collapsed, and people that were supposed to give evidence on his side just left. They didn't want to face that. So that was
associated.
Yeah, that was a wonderful way of actually using evidence and being persistent and putting the stuff out there. Got Michael B to say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong."
Well,
which didn't happen. Hello?
Why do we need to keep engaging creationists, in your opinion? And I'm deliberately saying keep engaging creationists because I am 100% with you on your approach of not being antagonistic, but keeping engaging. Why is it important to do that?
First of all, there's continually new scientific results coming in because science is not finished. It's carrying on. New stuff is coming in.
We'd pack up and go home if it was finished.
Exactly. And the other point is, again, if I can mention the Richard Dawkins and Stephen Gould, the two of them often did not see evolution or natural selection in the same way. But the one thing they agreed on was never to debate creationists.
Yes.
So the thing is, you can keep on engaging with the subject, but if you do engage every time in a confrontation, a discussion with creationists, they're not going to change those particular guys, but they gain from that because they then appear as if they are legitimate adversaries to be able, to be debated.
Worthy of being on the same platform as Richard Dawkins.
Yeah. And that's why Dawkins and Gould decided they're not debating. They're not doing public debates with creationists just for that reason. But the point is, Tertia, you know as well as I do that there are still some of these idiots going around South Africa and making pronouncements. I mean, I've explained stuff about evolution, this and that, and so on, and then you go onto one of these websites, Ask the Bible and and you see your name there, and they're shitting on you because you don't know anything, So I think that one should carry on putting the information out there in a sensible sort of way. And I've been, since 1981 up to about 2005, I was in a polemic in the Afrikaans newspaper in the Cape here, Die Burger, with one set of creationists after another, because they also die and go to heaven. So the next one comes along. And I've never attacked them. I've never gone out to belittle them, and I never initiated any polemic in the newspaper with them. All I did was I responded. And I tried to respond with a bit of humor, using biblical metaphors and stuff like that. And this has gone on for so long that there's a student at Stellenbosch here that did a master's degree in arts on that whole letter writing campaign. It became an MA. So
some use then.
Yes, I guess so. But of course, if you keep this up and you keep on putting reasons out there, these guys come back with their views. And I must say that their views haven't changed since 1963, when the creationist movement sort of popped up in America.
Yes.
We've had Dwayne Gish here.
He's dead
twice in South Africa, 9 years apart. And I debated him each time he was here, and he had the same slides, he had the same arguments.
Yes.
So what I didn't know when he got here the first time was that he had given a talk at the University of California somewhere, and Tim White, I don't know if you know of Tim White. He's the co-discoverer of Lucy.
No.
Okay, now Lucy is that not complete but partial skeleton they found of Australopithecus up in Kenya or somewhere up there.
Kenya, yes.
And Dwayne Gish went to the University of California to give a talk there.
Yes.
And then Tim White was ready for him. So he got a hominid skull out. And while Dwayne Gish was rattling off his stuff, Tim White got onto the stage and he had the skull with him.
Yes.
And he said to Dwayne Gish, "You know what this is?" And Dwayne Gish, of course, thought it would be Lucy. So, yeah, I know what this is. That's Lucy. It's an ape. So Tim White said, "No, it's not." And he started explaining what it was. And he started deriding Dwayne Gish to the extent that Dwayne Gish left the stage.
Really?
And out the door.
Wow. When
he spoke at Stellenbosch, I thought, what am I going to do? So I took a small skull of a mammal-like reptile, the group that I work on, the Therocephalia.
Yes.
And I put that in my shirt pocket and I attended the lecture. So he rattled off. He brought about 300 people with him from the Theological College in Somerset West. And these guys hung on his lips. So when it was question time, there was a microphone in the middle of the floor. I got up. I said, "Can I ask a question?" I said, "Yeah." I walked up to the microphone and I said, "Dr. Gish, I'm so glad you're in South Africa. You wrote that book called The Fossils Say No, saying that there are no transitionary forms between reptiles and mammals." "Yes," he said, "that's right." So I took this little skull out of my pocket and I said, "Well, here I've got one." I just held it up.
Yes.
And it was deathly quiet. And then he turned around to the guy behind him who was in the geology department, and they chatted. And he comes back and said, that's not what you say it is. That is a reptile." If he kept his mouth shut, I would have had to sit down. But he continued and he said, "It only has 4 bones in the lower jaw." So then I had him. And he started talking again. So I cupped my hands over the microphone and I said, "Wrong." And he kept talking. And I said, "Wrong." And I kept going until he stopped.
That's his technique, the Gish Gallop. He doesn't let you speak. He just carries on.
He just carries on. Anyway, but I was quite loud and the microphone was good. So I just kept on until he stopped. So I said to him, "Listen, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about, because a reptile has got 7 bones in the lower jaw, not 4. I have the evidence here for evolution. I work at the South African Museum in Cape Town. If you are really interested in the truth, I challenge you to come and see the evidence." And I sat down. This was a Tuesday.
Yes.
Wednesday, nothing happened. Thursday, nothing happened. And then the Dean of Science called him and he said, "Listen, you've been challenged. Ooh. And what are you going to do about it?" So the Friday morning, Dwayne Gish arrives and he's got one of his sidekicks with him. And he said, he's come to see the evidence. Mm-hmm. So I said, "Listen, there's just the 2 of us. We don't have to bullshit one another. I'll show you this stuff." So then I got the photographer of our department out beforehand. I said, "Look, what I want you to do before the guy leaves here, you take a photograph of the 2 of us and he'll be holding a mammal-like reptile skull in his hands," which he did. And if I'll have a look. I think I have the photograph here. Yes. Could I have a look quickly?
Please do. Yes. That story, Tercia, that story was gold, wasn't it?
Ta-da!
Oh, yes.
There's Dwayne Gish holding a Therocephalian skull. There's a very younger me, and behind him, there's a sequence of fossils leading
Yes.
from reptiles to mammals.
Yes.
Okay. He left, and a friend of mine in Chicago kept tabs on him when he got back, and he said that the pamphlet the creationists put out recalling Dr. Gish's visit to Africa said nothing about this confrontation. He spoke at this university, he spoke at that university. It was a success. They opened a new chapter at a place called Onderstepoort, which is a veterinary institution. Not a word of having been confronted in Stellenbosch. Anyway, so that was Dwayne Gish.
So, Jurie, I have observed in my own interactions with creationists in South Africa that I don't think they evolved because they haven't developed a funny bone. Because I find that they don't really have much of a sense of humor often. They and which makes it quite difficult to for me in any case to engage with young earth creationists. And the other thing that you've just touched upon that I really think needs to be addressed about young earth creationists in particular, but also in general in the social conversations that we have, is that there is such a thing as truth, and that when one is wrong, admit it. And I there's a would you agree with me that there's an inherent dishonesty in creationism, where they are not willing to admit where they don't know and when they are wrong, and that's so unbiblical. It really goes against Christianity as well.
Well, we've just had that example of how the encounter was propagandized and not included in the information being projected thereafter. So this is hypocrisy, if nothing else.
The thing is that in my experience, and I'm only speaking basically of the Afrikaans community where I grew up in, and which I know very well, and you yourself, Tertia, will probably know that we have been indoctrinated from primary school. In school, because we used to have Christian national education, where teachers were selected. I have done about 90 different talks at various schools ever since I joined the University of Stellenbosch, trying to explain about evolution in a non-confrontational way, because this is now, since 1994, has been included in the school curriculum. And the teachers have been telling me prior to that, you don't talk about evolution in school, because the headmaster is probably a member of the Broederbond then, as is the chief doctor, the magistrate, and probably one or two lawyers in that town as well. So they actually control what is being said and what is being taught at school.
Yeah.
So this was the situation we grew up in. So in fact, the educational system did not have to wage a battle against evolution. It was just never at school. It was never there.
Yeah.
So a whole lot of South Africans grew up with the Dutch Reformed Church in our case, which was predominant, because the dominee, the minister, knows everything and you don't cross him. And at school, you get Christian national education. So evolution didn't even figure. Yes. So by the time now, since 1984, when evolution was included in school, and they are supposed to teach religion on a comparative basis. You're not allowed to teach religion in mathematics or in any other science program. There's a period for that where you do a comparative analysis of religion, and most schools don't do that. they still being taught in primary school, we are little soldiers for Jesus.
Yeah.
They, yeah.
Jurie, I can tell you something shocking. Earlier this week, I heard about a learner in a school in South Africa, in our town, who was actually reprimanded. He was called in by one of the senior teachers after they had school assembly. He was called in, and he was reprimanded because he didn't close his eyes during prayer. And this child said, what did I do wrong? And he was told, you were disrespectful towards God. So, yeah, that happens.
How did they know? Somebody else have their eyes open to see that his were open?
Yeah.
But they were the lookout. So it's not disrespectful if you're on the watchtower having to keep a lookout.
Yeah.
Well, you reminded me with this story of the conflict between the religious intention to teach their agenda and the science intention to teach the real agenda, the truth, as far as we know it, because another South African contact of mine, Michael Smorenberg, has written a novel based on that and set in the Karoo region where the square kilometer array was at that time still being built, and the reaction against it by the priests and pastors of the locality who thought that this was an affront to God, looking at the sky to find out when they already knew what the truth was.
Yeah.
And the novel has been taken up as a potential movie script.
Yeah, I would welcome that, but it's certainly true. And this is the one thing I've often wondered about. How can you influence people to the extent, since childhood, to the extent when they're adults, they might even be scientists and still believe this nonsense?
Yes.
Now, the University of Potchefstroom was famous for that kind of tertiary education, and it was originally known as the Potchefstroom University for Christian
higher education. It's my alma mater.
There you go. Christian higher education. And if you read the stuff from there, you do science as a Christian. And there's several people that have written about this, saying that there is a Christian science that you do. All that kind of science does is it exposes the works of Christ in nature. Now, if you take that to another level, you should then have Christian mathematics and Christian physics, which is absolutely nonsensical. And hopefully now, with a changeover, they might be slightly different. But there are people, many people in South Africa, that I have observed that the only science there is Christian science. And it's amazing that you can have people qualified, graduated, and then they still believe this nonsensical notion about nature. But you often find that these guys are into computers or they into engineering, especially in America. A lot of engineers belong to the creationist society. So those are vocations where people do technical stuff. They don't get involved in the philosophy of science, the philosophy of biology or morality, any of those things. That is left to their Christian convictions.
Well, of course, in America, there was a movement called the Christian Scientist movement.
Yeah.
And they set up libraries in many of the American cities. I think they're closing them now. I think they've served their purpose and are expiring. I think they're in retirement. But I guess these libraries contained all the biblical sort of material that they would have approved of. However, we do have unavoidably a sort of Christian English subject material, don't we? Because so much of our language has been infiltrated by biblical expressions.
Oh, Afrikaans, absolutely. You know, there are a number, stacks of sayings and idioms about that come straight from the Bible, and because the Dutch were very prevalent in South Africa initially, we also have a lot of idioms referring to seafaring, sailing ships, and all the stuff that goes on there. But we are full of biblical quotes.
Yes. So that's one of the problems, isn't it? Because I've argued with a lot of theists about how you acquire religion, and they think that it's not a choice. They think that everybody is sort of imbued with religion at the moment of birth. And of course, it's their version of the religion, not anybody else's religion. And the idea is that that's it. It's stuffed into you. It's sort of like an injection, and you can't thereafter ever shift out of it. So my point of view is that maybe your first religion comes to you culturally because you learn it as you learn your native language, because it's all there entangled. But your second religion, you can choose, which is, of course, what Muhammad Ali did, having previously been Cassius Clay, raised as a Baptist.
Yeah.
So maybe you can't choose your first religion, but you can certainly choose your second.
Yeah, you can. I went around. I was thinking about that very same thing that you mentioned now, and I went around asking ministers, where do their new members of the congregation come from? And they all agree it comes from the families. Yes. If there's a family in that church, the children go into that church. So that's now. I've also with a friend of mine, Chris Jones, have written about this thing about where religion comes from, and I think it's pretty evident that initially humans were, and if you think of Australopithecus running around in the savannah in Africa, yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you because I'm very keen to hear, but I think for our audience sake, it might be relevant to note that who Chris Jones is, and that as far as I know, he's a Christian.
Chris Jones is a friend of mine in the theological seminary at Stellenbosch. That's what all I'm going to say.
That's fine, but yeah. I think it's important to note that he's definitely not an out. But what I like about the work that you do with Chris Jones is that there's a collaboration between the sort of hard sciences and then the soft sciences. If I can, theology and the hard science, I like that idea very much. So yes, I don't want to put Chris on the spot.
No, I would go so far as to say that that the kind of theology that's included in these papers are of a very liberal kind.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have a book? Do you have a book that I could promote here for you?
No, unfortunately not, because the only one that I've written on my own. Oh yes, we can. Sit down for a second.
You're looking as though you're about to expire electrically, Tercia.
Well, I did. We have these lights that you plug in and charge, and it just went out. So.
Okay, we have a book that myself and Chris Jones edited, and we also wrote the first chapter, and we got a number of authors to do the other chapters. And it's called Moral Issues in the Natural Sciences and Technology.
Okay. Oh, I know somebody who'd be very interested to grasp that, and I'm going to introduce you to our ethicist friend. Moral
Okay.
in
And the chapter that we wrote
sorry,
was
what was the end of that title? Moral issues in the natural sciences and technology.
technologies.
Technology.
Because
Yep.
there's and the first chapter we wrote called the evolution of morality.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay, so if you think about Australopithecus africanus,
Yep.
running around on the savannah,
Yep.
relatively small groups.
Yep.
By that time, no fangs, all the eye teeth have become smaller.
Yes.
No, just basically nails that we have as well.
Yes.
And they were in danger of being attacked by carnivores.
Yes.
And as some of these skulls have shown with bite marks of leopards in the skull itself. If you lived at that time and you lived in small groups, you slept in the trees and you looked for food, carrion or plants on the savannah, you were vulnerable.
Yes.
And of course, if there was thunder, if there was rain, if there was lightning, it all came from above.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you can either be blessed if it's rain, and the plants grew, and there
was light.
And there was light.
Yeah, and if there was
bushfire,
if there were bushfires, you had to run. So I think it became quite a natural reaction to be afraid of nature.
Yes, yes.
And all that stuff came from above.
Yes.
Now this is hypothesis. This is a thought experiment. But I'd like to go out on a limb a little bit further and say, if you, and this is because they found the beginnings of Broca's area in these skulls. So these guys were getting themselves together, perhaps to utter some words or communicate in some way, because animals do that with sound. Yeah. Anyway, if you suddenly realize that once in a while there was a fire, and after the fire there was some good stuff to eat, roast meat and whatever, and it all came from above. Why don't we go so far as to say, we don't really like these devastating bushfires. Why don't we burn something? Because obviously what's up there likes the fire and likes the smell of burning flesh. So why don't we burn something to pacify this, whatever is up there? And that puts the burnt offerings in the Bible for me in a totally different light.
Yes, yes. And
because it says exactly, you burn the stuff and the smoke curls up into the nostrils of God. He likes it. He likes the smell. So, I mean, that's hypothesizing. I mean, it's basically wishful thinking.
Well, it's entirely plausible, and it's survived to this very day in the South African barbecue.
Of course. Yeah.
Jurie, I want to link up with your thought experiment this idea that what's good is, well, also what's bad. It's if you can keep it happy, it's good, and if it's not happy, then it's bad. It comes from above, but the power comes from above. And then this idea of the underworld, they must have also known that things that die stay on the ground, and eventually when you go back, you just see the bones. So where did the rest go? It must have gone under the ground.
So what my thoughts on this is, and if you go through the literature, most writers sort of write in this way, you know, anybody who's writing something on the origin of religion sort of goes partially that way. So my bottom line is that the fear of God started off by being a fear of nature.
Yeah.
And then one of the sharper pencils in the box thought, but I can go into the mountain, or I can go into the bush and come back and said, I've seen something and we should do this or we should do that. And that, to a certain extent, is substantiated by an archaeologist we have here, Renee Retief. She's works with University of the Witwatersrand, and we've been in the field with her, and she's shown us that where these bushman shamans go into the hills, they look for suitable rock surfaces, and then they talk to whatever deity they believe in, and this reverberates. So she was in the field with a group of people one day, and she went up to this rock, and when she came back, they said to her, what the hell happened up there? We heard these voices and reverberations and stuff, and she was actually talking into this hollow in the rocks.
Yes.
And she showed this to us when she went along on a Karoo field trip. And here, Mikey's Fontaine, which is just off the N1, she went up and we stood at the bottom, and she was right up against that rock face, and she was talking, and it was certainly impressive. So I imagine that one of the sharper pencils in any group will use this to gain prominence or to gain a voice, and eventually be able to say, whatever's up there wants us to do this or to do that.
And I'm its agent, and I can help you if only you give me money.
Exactly. And isn't this what the church has been doing for thousands of years?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
and then we haven't even spoken about things like hallucinations and using mind-altering drugs by accident or on purpose. So we haven't even touched upon that, which I think feeds into this as well. And
and the evolution of morality has already been touched on by Charles Darwin. If you read his work on humans, you'll see that as social groups grew and they had to survive, they had to work together, and they had to hunt or whatever in such a fashion that they experience the least damage. So if the three of us go out hunting, John, you wouldn't pick me to hunt with you unless you know that I can cover your back. And I would then have a responsibility towards you.
Yes.
And developing this further and further, you can see
it's cooperation that you're talking about here.
Yeah, and you can see how a moral attitude evolved out of that. But then you have to, I think, say again too that you're talking here about moral norms, not moral codes, because moral norms is what we were born into and what we naturally adapt to.
Yes.
Moral codes is what society puts on us, and that can change over time.
Yes.
It's immoral to smoke now. It was moral to smoke a number of years ago.
Yes.
All kinds of stuff like cannibalism was morally right at a certain age.
Yes.
And now you can go to jail if you eat somebody else.
Yes.
So
misogyny was quite popular at one time too.
Yeah. So I think if you speak about the evolution of morality, you've got to distinguish between naturally evolved moral attitudes, moral norms, and moral codes which society puts on you. And this is what the church is very good at.
Yes, yes. Well, only today I made a little video I've taken to debunking an American evangelist fellow called Frank Turek, who you may have heard of.
I've just heard the name.
Yes, well, he's got a channel, Cross-Examined, he calls his channel. And he puts a lot of Christian videos he's on stage and he's putting Christian arguments as to why it's the best religion and you should all believe it. And he's right. So what I do is I grab his videos and then I chop my presentations into where I think it's appropriate. And I did one this very day, which was on that very subject, because his let me see if I can find it. It's 5 minutes long, so I'm not going to play it in the show, but I can link it. Well, it's the top video in our list. Oh, I'm sorry, it's playing. Let me stop that. So I can link it in the show because it's the top video in the home list, which my computer is refusing to go to right now. Here we go. So what he was trying to do was argue that morality is objective. And of course, it's Christian morality. Now my position here is that I don't think anything's objective because as soon as something has been thought of, any proposition that's been perceived has gone through a brain, it's been influenced by the attitudes and the experiences that brain has generated. And so to a degree, it must be subjective. So not only do I not think that morality can be objective, but I don't think we can actually have complete objectivity anytime.
Yeah.
So I made this case in that little video and explained to him in similar words to what you've just said, where morality actually does come from. Cooperation. Yeah.
And the thing is that religious people very often use morality as an all-encompassing word, and you can't be a Christian, or the world won't exist as we know it if there's not Christian morality. And this is just nonsense.
Yes.
Because that, what he was talking about most probably are moral codes, and that's what humans think out. That's what they propose. You do this and you do that, and this is moral and this is immoral. Which is stuff that just changes over time. You're right.
Usually, but the issue that he was posting was that it must be objectively immoral to damage children. He didn't use the word damage. He was talking about my brain's gone dead. Take a look at the video and you'll see what he was arguing. He was saying that he didn't use the word rape, but the idea was to harm babies has got to be objectively immoral. And well, take a look at the video.
Jurie, you and I have had many discussions, but something that I was just thinking of with regards to paleontology and evolution. I was taught as a child that one has to know one's place. And to me, that is one of the problems of creationism, because it puts us in the wrong place. It makes us put ourselves in the wrong place. And I fully agree that one should know one's place, and we should know our place as species evolved from other species and see the connectedness that we have with all other species, and we should know our place. And creationism prevents us from knowing our place, whereas science and a thorough understanding of paleontology and evolution puts us in our proper place and helps us to explore the places where we should be and we shouldn't be, and how we should be in those places. What do you guys think about that?
I agree with you, because if you take an evolutionary view of all this, you'll see that humans are a side branch of a side branch of a side branch. In fact, just a little twig on this whole tree of life.
Mm.
Michael Roos has made the comment in one of his books, tongue in the cheek, commenting on the way that we act today, is that we are medium-sized apes that came down from the trees and went into the garbage business. And if you think about that, that is really, that is brilliant. Now, what you were saying about creationists thinking that they are the bee's knees is really a terrible attitude concerning the condition of the planet today. Biologists and natural sciences realize that we should not argue in an anthropocentric way. We should have compassion for the planet, for all the other animals. I once heard a story, I read a piece where a guy tried to say that biologists and evolutionists should be existentialists. They should be angry at the world like Sartre and those guys were, which is absolutely nonsense. When biologists get angry, they get angry because the earth and ecology is being raped.
Yes.
They're angry about that. They're not like Sartre and those guys who said, it's nauseous to be a human, it's terrible, and this and that. He even wrote the book called Nausea. So biologists are not existentialists in that way. Their anger comes from a concern about our place in nature and nature itself. And we have completely transgressed our position on the family tree. There even was a case of a senator in America who was a creationist who was promoting all this stuff about open pit mining and taking fossil fuel out, because when we die, we're going to leave the earth. We're not going to be here, so we might as well use it up.
Yes.
Which I think touches on your idea about creationism. In that sense, it's dangerous.
Yes.
The run-of-the-mill creationists we have around here are just ludicrous and stupid. But the idea behind that we are the chosen, we are the crown of creation, and that sort of stuff, that is really dangerous.
Yes, especially as it makes next generations victims.
Exactly. Yeah, then they have to deal with the stuff that we have precipitated, which is wrong. It's just, and how are we? Well, we can sit around and talk about all this, but what are we going to do about it? Do you think it's okay just putting out scientific information out there? Should we be militant like Richard Dawkins and Hitchens? Or should we just think that these guys will go away?
Well, let me.
Go ahead.
I don't like to be militant, but I do think we should be a little bit more activistic, because I think we need to speak out, not in a demeaning, militant, aggressive manner, but I do think we should speak out. And maybe I always think of myself as a nice person, but it seems that when you speak truth,
why?
I don't know, Jurie. I don't know. It's my.
Well, I think it's horses for courses. I think it takes all different styles. I'm not a militant person. I'm like Tertia. I like to imagine that I'm a cuddly bunny, but I think we've got to keep plugging away at it in our own particular styles. There's a place for Dawkins. There's a place for Tertia. There might even be a place for you and me, Jurie.
Well, thank you for those words. I just want to bring up something else again. We were talking about who becomes creationists. And I've got an article that was written by 2 or 3 American researchers, and they did by means of questionnaires at American schools. And their claim is that the default position of young children is to believe their parents absolutely. So you start off, if you have very Christian parents, you start off believing that. You start off believing in Father Christmas, you start off believing in the Easter Bunny and all those kinds of things. But as you mature, you begin to realize that the Easter Bunny and Father Christmas are nice myths. They serve their purpose and you go on. But if the Christianity of your parents is reinforced day after day after day, like we had to go to Sunday school and the main sermon after that, so it's like an hour, and then the Sunday school and everything, and it's reinforced in school. It's very, very hard to get rid of that.
Yes.
It stays there somewhere. I think the Catholics have got a saying that if you give us a child until he or she is 5, they'll always be sympathetic to the Catholic Church.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And this is what these people found, because the default position is also to take the world as it is. So a dolphin is a fish. The purpose of a lion is to be in the zoo. That's the I mean, imagine yourself as a child in this complex world. You don't initially have the ability to distinguish, discuss, and so you take it as it is, as a starting point.
Yeah.
And if that's being reinforced for most of your juvenile life, you can find a guy that's a top computer scientist and he's a creationist. He uses all the equipment of modernity, but his attitude is Francis Bacon.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's an example that was promulgated by another Stephen Gould, the Stephen J. Gould, who wanted the separation into different compartments in the head, non-overlapping magisteria. That was his.
Yeah, the Noma thing, but yeah. He was Stephen Gould is one of my favorite people in the world. Unfortunately, he's dead. Fortunately, I met him in Cape Town.
Yeah.
But this idea of NOMA, of non-overlapping magisteria, does not float my boat.
No, it's nonsense.
He was a clever man. He could explain evolution by using the price of Hershey bars and stuff like that.
Yes.
But that idea that it's two different magisteria, I'm sorry, doesn't work.
That's so that he could walk into church on Sunday and forget everything he'd done in the previous 5 days.
Because it felt good.
Yeah. Well, Jurie, we've done our hour and it's been fascinating. I've loved your stories. And before we part, I just want to announce that next week we've got another interesting African guest. This is Bar Hart, who is a Nigerian, very well educated, and I think he would prefer that I called him a free thinker, because being an atheist in Nigeria is quite a risky proposition.
Yes, absolutely.
So come and watch us talk to him next Saturday. Jurie, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We should do it again sometime.
Whenever you say. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. Bye, Tasha. Bye, John.
Bye, Jurie. Thank you so much for short notice chatting with us.
Yes, absolutely. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.